First of all, I would like to draw a little bit of attention to Lisa Harris and Amy Stillwell in particular, among others, who've been instrumental in bringing the community of Hope International to St. Peter and St. Paul for their tireless work over 14 weeks to learn the rule of life and to prepare for this ministry. And so, again, let's recognize the folks and those people who put together this yummy, delicious reception for us. Thank you. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who after the creation of the world rested from all your works, and sanctified a day of rest for all your creatures, grant that we, putting away all earthly anxieties, may be duly prepared for the service of your sanctuary, and that our rest here upon earth may be a preparation for the eternal rest promised to your people in heaven, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Well, this will be a lot of fun for me, and I hope it's fun for you. I have a lot of pictures. In some ways, it's like what I did over my summer, And then we went here, and we went there. So there's a little bit of that, but I do want to share with you some reflections on this time as a sabbatical. And, can everyone hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. Volume is good. Doesn't need to be turned up or down? Sounds good? Okay. And Larry, if I can ask you just to take a look at that phone and make sure you still got the image you got there. Good. And actually, Larry, can you go to the back and switch off the lights that shine right here? Might be a little bit. Leave the rest of the lights on.
I thought you were telling me to leave.
Yes, Larry, yes.
So at my Sunday morning class, Larry is always saying, "Can I help? Can I help? Can I make copies?" He's great. So thank you, Larry. So I want to share my reflections of my time as sabbatical. Now, I'm going to take my watch off. I'm going to set it here, and you know what it means when a preacher puts his watch on the pulpit? Absolutely nothing at all. Yeah. Even worse today, because I looked at my watch, and it's like 7:45, and everybody else says, it's 8 o'clock. It's time to start the service. So my watch is now off. Let's see, do I have it? Okay, 12:16. It's 12:16. Okay. I'm going to try to keep this to an hour, but I'm long-winded. Yeah. Plus, I also want to share with you a little bit of my two trips to the Grand Canyon, which is not officially sabbatical, but enough of you have asked about that I think we'll have some fun with. So, sabbatical. What is a sabbatical? Well, a sabbatical, the word sabbatical comes from the word Sabbath. And as you know, the Lord resting on the seventh day, completing creation, invited us to this Sabbath rest as well. So we have Sabbath every 7 days. The Bible also describes in the Old Testament a Sabbath for the land, that every 7th year the land is to lie fallow. And if you know anything about agrarian customs historically, this was so that the land could renew its nutrients, otherwise depleted by 6 years of farming. In fact, there's another sabbatical that goes 7 times 7 years, and that is the 50th year, the Jubilee year, after 49 years, 7. So the Jubilee year is part of the tradition of the Old Testament as well. And the Sabbath is not just about rest, it is about rest with God. It is not an inactive rest, it is an active rest to be renewed as a child of God, and to find your dependency on God and not on the work of your own hands. Right? We very much into the work of your own hands. God invites us to be dependent on Him and rejoice in resting in His providence for us. So, a sabbatical for a clergy. Sabbaticals started to be something that was used in academia in, I want to say, the 19th century, the 1800s. And it was an opportunity for academics after a period of time to go somewhere else to pursue their studies, to pursue their research in a different context, a different university, maybe work with different scholars in the same field, and to be renewed in that way. Sabbaticals for clergy started to be customary as well for a number of different reasons. Most especially for clergy who are the only priest in the parish. That's the only preacher that priest ever hears, week after week, month after month, year after year. And just in the context of that parish, sometimes, well, often, and we find it true for us, and we find it true in the secular world as well. After 6 or 7 years at a job, if it's the same job, it's hard to see it in a new way. And it's hard to sort of get yourself out of the system to be able to look at the system in a fresh way. So sabbaticals are very, very helpful for clergy to be able to do that and to rest. Clergy, among other helping professions, often work, kind of a 24/7 expectation. But we are also reminded that keeping the Sabbath day holy is one of the big 10, right? So that's the practices for clergy are also to do a good job of keeping a day off, keeping vacation time, keeping personal time, and having help and support that is not just from within the parish. But sabbaticals are part of clergy wellness and a part of helping the parish to both retain clergy for a long time, because one solution is that the priest could move. But if the priest is going to stay, finding some way to refresh and renew so that that priest can come back and be invigorated in the mission and ministry of that church in a new way, a fresh way, and maybe see with fresh eyes, is something that's helpful not just for the priest, but also for the parish as well. So for clergy, sabbatical has to do with rest and renewal as a priest of the church generally. So clergy look to get fed spiritually in our vocation, but also as a priest of this parish. So a good design of a sabbatical addresses the needs that this parish might have for the priest to develop and grow. And lastly, or perhaps first of all, sabbatical is for a priest as a child of God. Be reminded of who he or she is as a child of God, because that really is the first vocation that we have before our vocation to the priesthood. So my plan for my sabbatical back in 2020 was a much more complicated plan, and over time I grew to understand that complicated is not necessarily good for a sabbatical plan. But what I decided to do, to aim for, in a not overly organized way, was to do some writing that I'll tell you about. I wanted to spend some time with St. Jude's in Smyrna, St. Jude's Whitney Hill with Father Ramon Betances. You've heard me talk about that a little bit. I'll tell you more about that. Those two, but that in particular is connected to the ministry of this parish. I wanted to have some time to connect with friends, with family, especially travel with my wife, and I'll explain why that's important and why that's an important part of a sabbatical as well. I wanted to do some kayaking. As you might know, I'm an avid kayaker, and it feeds my soul in many ways. I needed time for rest. It wasn't kayaking, it was just rest, and time to reconnect with roots. That's something that I think became more clear to me as I got into the sabbatical itself. My roots with my friends, my family, some of my own personal roots. So the writing part was that I wanted to, well, let me give you my overall impression. My overall impression is that I did not accomplish all the things that I intended to accomplish, but I accomplished a whole lot of rest. And I think that's really the primary goal of the sabbatical. And that rest made a difference. Most difference it made is when I returned. And I'll say some more about that. So the writing portion, I wanted to write a commentary of what I call the Bible's greatest hits. You may know that I wrote a book called Tour of the Bible, an introduction for the unfamiliar. I have copies here that I'm willing to sell you. Right through shipping costs, right? Appreciate it. And this was a survey of Holy Scriptures, and it broke things down into sections, and sections that were outlines, and along those outlines maybe a one-paragraph summary of each book, as well as a short list of what I call the Bible's greatest hits. This is to say, if you start off reading the Bible and you just have no experience of it, starting and getting hit deep into genealogies after a few chapters is maybe not the most engaging way to go, and it might make it a little bit more difficult to understand. The Bible's greatest hits are the ones, perhaps sections of the Bible, passages of the Bible that are perhaps the the most well-known, or perhaps they are representative of a particular book or a particular kind of genre of Scripture. And so I thought, well, this might be a way to help people to step into the Bible a little bit. These things might be familiar, or these things might help them understand how, the prophets work, or how wisdom literally works. So I wanted to write a commentary on each one of these, and I got as far as Isaiah. So I'm a little bit behind. But what I wanted to do was really a fairly lightweight commentary. So this is an example of one with Moses and God at the burning bush, Exodus chapter 3. So I've got about 3 paragraphs in here. The story itself is pretty well known, and if you read the text speaks for itself rather well. But then there are a few interesting things about the text, about what's going on, about the dynamic between God and Moses that usually gets lost in the stained glass language of the way it's presented. What I get a kick out of is how completely reluctant Moses is. But who shall I say sent me? But what if they don't believe me? But maybe I'm not sending all. I can't even speak well. Send somebody else. So make mention of this. And then at the end, I've got questions for study, some things that ask direct questions about the text, some things that dig into, why does God choose to reveal? What does God choose to reveal to Moses about himself? How is this important for Moses? And then questions like, why does God choose Moses? And then questions for us, how do we respond to God's call? Where are you reluctant to answer or unsure of God's call? How might you make clarity? So, in brief, for each one of the Bible Experience tips, this is one of the things that I was working on this summer. So what's next with this project? Well, I've got some more writing to do. And also my Sunday school class is an introduction to the Bible, which I've done before, and is currently ongoing, and that'll go through this fall. And either in Advent or in January, I plan to start up a Bible study on the Bible's greatest hits, using some of this material and these questions that I put together. So that's where I'm headed on my writing project. So what else did I do on my sabbatical? Well, I did some travel. In particular, I did some travel and pilgrimage to France with my wife. One of the reasons why this is important for clergy to do something like this, first of all, to get a totally different perspective, to go to some place that is totally different is extraordinarily helpful. The other thing, too, I'll just say, this is a very practical sort of thing, but, we work weekends. And at St. Peter and St. Paul, that includes every other Saturday for me and for Mother Elisa. So traveling for a weekend to go see family is kind of a rare option, so we have to kind of plan those things carefully. And so with that, having an extended period of time where we can reconnect with family and do things on a special level is also very important. Another thing, and you may not be aware of this, but when Soka and I first met, Soka's son Alex was about 3 years old. She had been married before, and he was about 3 years old. So when we got married, Alex was about 4.5, and I adopted Alex as my son. I'm very proud of him. He's here visiting us now. He's about 29. He himself is in seminary, actually, in the Catholic Church. But so we were an instant family. And so we've not really done a lot of this travel and time for ourselves. So this was a really important opportunity for us. And we'd never been to France, and we really wanted to go. So we went to France. We spent 4 days in Paris. We went to Mont Saint-Michel and Rennes, which was an interesting surprise, to the religious community of Taizé, which is near Lyon, and to Lyon itself. So, what did we do in France? Well, we did some fun things. We saw a lot of art. A lot of art. I took a million pictures of art. I'm not going to show you a million pictures of art, but I'll show you some. We went to the Rodin Museum. You see the Pumphrey there. And so we have lights in the front, but not in the back.
You want?
Can we get this row of lights on?
Sure.
I want you to turn the front lights on.
And on the right, this is from Louvre. We went to the Louvre. And you can see how enormous this art just reaches up like 20 feet high and 30 feet wide. Absolutely. That's good. Thank you. Excellent. We also went to Musée d'Orsay, which is built out of a train station. The buildings themselves are fascinating. On the right, you see an earlier version of Vincent van Gogh's Starry, Starry Night. We also saw a lot of amazing, wonderful impressions starting at Orangerie and Musée d'Orsay. This is Gustave Caillebots, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, I'm guessing, and Berthe Morisot on the right. And so we saw lots of wonderful art. Saw art in Lyon as well, and a few other places. We also saw a lot of churches, as you might imagine, in a journey that has pilgrimage as part of it, including Notre Dame de Paris, which is still closed because of the big fire that had long ago. You could walk around the building, and around the building there were posters on the fence around the building that described what was going on. I was fascinated to see a building that looked like it was made out of containers, ocean freight containers, where you could long, 10 feet wide, I don't know how high, stacked on top of each other, like 6 high and 7 long and 5 wide. This huge building. I'm like, what is all this for? Well, they explain why. So, for instance, the roofing material was made out of lead, tons and tons of lead. Lead melts at a really low temperature, lead evaporates at a very low temperature, and it went up in smoke during fire. They found increased lead levels in farm fields far away from Paris. So you can only imagine inside the building, everything's covered in lead fume, microscopic lead dust. And so anybody working in there has got to wear a hazmat suit, have a big positive pressure filter, helmet that blows in clean air, and of course, a lot of it's up high. And so they have to be strung up on ropes, so they had to hire like 130 people who have skills and training to do this stuff on ropes. But then you got to make sure that the building is not going to fall down because the mortar has gone through chemical changes because of the fire being so high. And so you have to do things like make sure the flying buttresses don't fall in so that the wall doesn't fall in. So you have to build these enormous timbers on these arcs and put them underneath the flying buttresses so that they can stand up. Oh, and the fire started because they were doing work on the inside, and they had, 7 stories of scaffolding built up in the middle of this thing that all melted in the middle of it from the fire, and it's all 7 stories of scaffolding getting ready to fall in. Can you imagine taking that down piece by piece and making sure nobody gets killed in the process? So that's just a high-speed run through why it's complicated and why it's so vast and expensive. But so we got a chance to see a little bit of Notre Dame and understand a little bit about what was going on inside. Saint-Chapelle is a small chapel that's nearby that is an amazing display of stained glass. The stained glass was very different. If you looked at it closely, they're tiny little biblical scene. But I couldn't for the life of me interpret any of it. I'm like, that scene is, I don't know. We have to read my Bible. I looked at every one of them and had such a hard time. But you can't see most of them because they're so high on the ground. But the full effect of it is pretty special. These are one of the few places, I think maybe I saw maybe 3 buildings, 3 or 4, about 3.5 buildings that had Gothic architecture. Most of them were Basilica style, and most of them were 19th century. I'm not sure if World War II wiped out some of those older, but I suspect the French Revolution wiped out some of those older, or a lot of those older. On the left, this is Saint-Sulpice, home to Charles-Louis Bidot, who was organist. George, how long was Bidot at Sulpice?
63 years.
63 years. I know it was some enormous quantity of time. And
Tom, he was never officially hired. He was an interim for 6 years.
Interim for 63 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's good.
He is, of course, a very accomplished organist and composer, and he's the one who's composed the Bidot Toccata that George plays on Easter and at other times, much to the delight of his direction and others. It's a beautiful piece. So we went to Saint-Sulpice. I'm not sure if you can see in the picture, but there is a service going on in the front. That's a funeral. So I got a chance to listen to a French funeral for our dearly departed Antoine. On the right is Sacré-Cœur, which is another 19th century basilica in gleaming white at the top of a huge hill called Montmartre. And that was a very beautiful building inside as well. So we saw a number of churches. We also had a chance just to see the city of Paris, and we stayed in what some might call a Rue Claire area. Rue Claire, this is Rue Claire in particular, if I'm not mistaken. It has a lot of street-side vendors and street-side cafes. Just a beautiful place. So 4 days in Paris, 1 day in Versailles. You kind of got to see it, but I can't say I got really excited about it. opulent and literally quite pagan. I mean, all the art was pagan mythology. So it was hard for me to really get into it. Big, huge, exhausting. For all the food we ate, we came back lighter than we left because of all the walking. One of the things that I very much wanted to do in France was see Mont Saint-Michel. And I'd love to go to Normandy and see that, but especially for a sabbatical, to make pilgrimage to some very special spiritual places. Mont Saint-Michel was on my list. It's this magical place. It's this small island, rocky island, off the coast of Brittany and Normandy, with Brittany and Normandy claim for their own. And it's got this abbey built on top. It's just this kind of beautiful and majestic place. And it was fascinating to go, to be there, to pray there, to learn more about its history. It is on what would be an island at high tide and not an island at low tide. And they've had, for centuries, a causeway that you walk across in order to get there at low tide. But it's silted up so much that there are only like 10 days in fall and 10 days in spring in which the water actually surrounds it. So they took down the causeway, they built a bridge, and they built a system of dams to the river so that it can wash the silt out of the sea. But as you can see, this is low tide here, so people are along the sand. The first sanctuary was built on this island in 708. The abbey up at the top was built in 966. It went through quite a few cataclysms in its lifetime. Lightning strikes on the spire a number of times that caused fires and destruction. Earthquakes. One half of the building would fall down, and then they'd rebuild it, and another half of the building would fall down, and they'd rebuild it. And I'll take you through some of how the rest of the architecture and buildings are around it. It's had a rather strange life in terms of vitality and disrepair. And true to form in the French Revolution, which I had reinforced to me on this trip, of how awful the French Revolution was. From 1790 to 1874, it was a prison. Now, somebody said it was a prison for recalcitrant monks. And I thought, what a prison! I found a recalcitrant monk, what a place to be. But no, I think it was used also as a general prison for nearly 90 years after the French Revolution. Then it was restored as a Benedictine abbey for most of its history. And now it is run by the monastic fraternities of Jerusalem. We've had a fun story to tell. Most of our experiences of public transportation worked out rather well, which is surprising considering that my French is about 30 years old and has about 30 years since I last practiced. That's a slight exaggeration, not that much. So we managed to figure things out with the train that took us from Rennes to Pumphrey came within 200 yards of the station in Pumphrey and stopped. Something was wrong with the railroad crossing. And we were supposed to get our bus that is there specifically when the train comes, it leaves 10 minutes later to take pilgrims to Mont Saint-Michel. And they said, oh, the bus will wait for you. And it didn't. So we pulled in 20 minutes late, the bus is gone, and this is a town with not much going on, and maybe one taxi. We took the first people who figured out that guy was a taxi driver, and the rest of us were standing around trying to figure out what to do. We struck up a conversation, would you call it that? I would, because I'm delighted I was able to get by at all in French, with Christophe and Dorian, a young French couple who were also going to Mont Saint-Michel. We were trying to figure out what to do, and we went into a patisserie, and they talked to the owners of the patisserie, and a man who in English described himself as a chocolate baker, said, sure, I'll take you. There's a shuttle bus, I'll take you to the shuttle bus. So we loaded our luggage into his car and drove in and took the shuttle bus. There's the shuttle bus, and Dorian and Crystal, friends that we made on the way. Strangers, as Mother Lisa might say, who helped us and were very generous with us. So Mont Saint-Michel is, you see that building up on top of it. And then there's sort of one street that winds its way up around the rim of it to get toward the base of some stairs. And in it, that's kind of where the town is. And the town is this set of buildings sort of scrunched together. So that street, that road, is, and it's narrow, it's maybe, 8 or 10 feet wide. At its widest, maybe 15 or 20, but not that much. So this gives you a sense, the picture on the left gives you a sense of its busyness. Rick Steves said, it's crazy in the middle of the day, go in the afternoon, stay overnight, and then leave in late morning. So we more or less did that, right? A little later in the day than we planned. So you can see how busy it is, but by the time we got to the base of the Abbey, you can see how the tourists were on their way out. So you go up these stairs, and you go into the Abbey, and you go up and around, and you go up another set of stairs, and some more stairs, and you get up to the top. And at the top, there's this enormous plaza. What you see in this picture on the left is maybe a quarter of that plaza. And I forget it is. It's not a plaza, it's something else. But on most of this plaza was a large portion of the nave of the Abbey. But it collapsed. So they left some of it, so they rebuilt some of it, and they left some of it collapsed and made this big plaza out of the front. You can see the spire on the right-hand side. You can see the spire, and this portion of the nave here. Notice the arches. They're rounded arches. So these are Romanesque features. The apse, that is to say, the portion of the building that is near where the high altar would be and behind it, that also collapsed at some point in its history. And they rebuilt that in Gothic style with the arches that are pointed, as you see in Canterbury or in Notre Dame or another cathedral. This is at the top, and you can see the shadow of Mont Saint-Michel in the bay as it's coming in. Half the mountain is pretty much a cliff. Half the island is pretty much a cliffside. So nothing on that side. And then on the other side, you can see the countryside that's nearby. And in these fields, they grow grass that is tolerant to salt water. And they have sheep that graze in these fields. And they say that the sheep grazing on the salt-tolerant grass makes them pre-salted. And so the special dishes that you buy, you see in the restaurants in Mont Saint-Michel, price salad, price salad, which I have. It's good. It's delicious. And you see the bridge. This is from the apse looking down into the nave. And so you see in the center on the left, you see that rounded arch, but on the left and the right, you see Gothic structure. You see those ribs in the columns themselves, and you see that slight point in the arch. And then on the right, you see a statue of St. Michael himself. Mont Saint-Michel was not very adorned and elaborate. Some of that has been its long history of disrepair and the reluctance of historians to do new things, to very old things, very old buildings. And some of that is the nature of 19th century basilicas that were never allowed to go into disrepair by comparison. But I think it's lovely, and I felt it was very lovely in its simplicity. But, Anglican. So I like to go with simplicity. This is from the Abbey. You walk out, if I'm not mistaken, into a cloister. So this is like a square courtyard where the borders of the square are a walkway that's covered, and in the middle of it is a grassy area. You kind of see the corner of the grassy area there. But these arches are set up a little bit offset, which I found interesting. And the stonework is all carving in stonework for those rose petals. And I thought, how did they manage to do that behind the rose petal that's still attached to the main stone and keep it together? Incredible artistry. And went through this section of the Abbey, went through a great restoration. There's a window from the cloister that looks out onto, and you see the people at the top. This is this platform. Now take a look at the layers underneath, the layers of building underneath. I have a couple more slides that describe this. And this huge appendage here is kind of like a flying buttress to hold the walls of this structure up. It's called the marve, that is to say the mirror, because of how the thing can still be standing and be that thick and made out of masonry. But that's that platform that I showed you before. The Abbey goes in this way. Now, on the right, you see the marve, and you see these different layers of building. Now, some of it was in the middle to hold up the Abbey, and some of it was buildings that were sort of built around the outside of it and attached on, all kind of supporting that structure and holding up the stone that holds up the Abbey itself. But it's an amazing feat of architecture for 966, and to go through this place, you start with the Abbey, you go into the cloister, you come in the cloister, you go into the refectory, and then you go into some other thing, and you kind of go in this helix around the building, and it's kind of like being in Hogwarts. You know, this mysterious set of stairways that leads you into some new building, and this room is different from that room, and this, you know, and they're not really sure what happened here, but they're guessing maybe this room's fancier, so maybe it was to receive guests. This room was plainer, maybe that's where the monks ate. And you kind of go down these levels until you get down on the left here to the crypt. And you can see there's hardly space in between the pillars that's holding up the apse that has the spire, that has the tower that has the spire at the top. Incredible feat of architecture and faithfulness for folks back in the day. Now, as you come out of the lower levels of the abbey, then you come out onto the top of the battlements on the walls. You may remember seeing sort of like a castle wall across the front. And you come out on top of the wall. You can walk out on the wall and kind of walk back to your hotel, or walk to a restaurant from the city walls. And which is what we did. We walked along until we found our hotel, and went in through a little door into the restaurant, walked upstairs to our room, came back down for dinner. On the right, this I think captures some of, you see the structure that's below the abbey, so there's a number of rooms and so on up there, but also this is a separate building. So coming down from it on the side toward the countryside, toward the shore, there are a couple more buildings, and there's a few more open spaces, like this open space here, that in the past was a garden. And there's a cemetery for the monks. There's also a small church down the hill from the abbey, and some very peaceful places when all the tourists are gone. Some very peaceful places to go and pray and to see this beautiful place. And think about how it's been prayed over for centuries. So going in the evening was a great way to do it. And then we were there Saturday night, so we worshiped in the abbey. But Saturday night, we ate like kings, as we did pretty much every night in France. This is the lamb présalé with, is that like a sweet potato puree or something? Still gonna have salmon, best trout I've ever had. Believe it or not, surprised we were trout. I wrote my journal about everything we ate. I left it, or else I described some of the plates I'm going to show you, because the food was great. This is actually a picture of a picture. These are not themselves live, but these are brothers and sisters from the monastic communities of Jerusalem who have charge of Mont Saint Michel. They were very friendly and very welcoming, and you know the group of pilgrims worshiping in the abbey seemed very simple, roughly international, but considerably more francophone than anything else. The service was in French. It was Trinity Sunday. I almost followed the sermon, you know, a little bit in terms of talking about the way that the Holy Trinity, the persons of the Trinity express themselves to us, telling us something about the nature of the Holy Trinity, and then I started the gloss. Anyhow, it was a beautiful service and lovely music that we were invited to participate in. Great hospitality there, great worship with the other pilgrims that morning, Sunday. And from there, on Sunday, we went back to the city of Rennes around midday. So get the shuttle to the bus, to the train, to Rennes. Rennes was a great surprise. It was, logistically, it was a stopover with the high-speed train from Paris. But I learned that Elise Barnes spent a year there. And so Slick and I talked with her about her experience, and she gave us a few pointers about what's going on in Rennes and what might be really good to see. St. Anne's, this one church, the Cathedral of St. Peter, and some places to eat and so on. It was a tremendous find. It's not in any of Rick Steves' books or anything like that, but we really enjoyed it. It was a great surprise. It's a city of Brittany, and does have some medieval flavor to it, both in its churches and some of its other buildings. This is an example of the half-timber architecture that you find on some of its cobblestone streets. I'm wondering if that restaurant right next door, I'm not sure which one it was. Anyhow, also on Saturday when we were there, they had this amazing farmer market. Oh my gosh. It seemed like mile after mile of the most amazing produce you've ever seen. And Soka, who loves this sort of thing, just have tremendous produce, all just, I mean, we found these strawberries that just melted in your mouth. I mean, these are not strawberries that were sort of picked when they're still blue and, put in nitrogen and shipped off to be bought and eaten a week later. I mean, these are, you got to eat them within hours of picking them. exaggerate. They were fantastic. We ate them immediately. I mean, they didn't last the last 2 or 3 steps away from where we bought them. And they had this indoor portion where they sold all these amazing meats and cheeses, and you can get the cheese that is from the summer cows, you know, because the summer cows eat a different kind of food than the fall cows, and it changes the flavor of the cheese, you know. Fantastic. Food was great. In England, if you went to kind of a local restaurant, you'd go to a pub, right? I'm not sure what you'd go to in this States. A burger joint? Did you go to Chick-fil-A? In Paris, you'd go to a cafe, right? In Brittany, you would go to a creperie. And a creperie would have, for dessert, a long list of dessert crepes. Right? But for a meal, you would eat a galette. And the galette is kind of, this is going to be an American explanation, not a gastronomic explanation here. A total American amateur. A galette is kind of like an omelet. But, you know, the sort of eggy material is a little bit thinner. This may be especially at this particular restaurant. I don't know if all galette look like it. But the thing that I found awesome, this is true, I think, about most of the French food that I've had, was, you know, in America, let's say you get a ham, cheese, and spinach omelet. They take the ham, they take the cheese, they take the spinach, they throw it in there, and mix it up and give you your omelet. This was kind of like a galette buffet, right? Because you had your sauteed tomato over there, and your sauteed spinach over there. You had your mushrooms over there. You had some more egg here, some different kind of cheese over there, different kind of cheese over there. You have your prosciutto, you have your andouille sausage in this. So every bite was like a different galette. And this is kind of a very ordinary, unassuming restaurant. You know, that with prices cheaper than the United States. So on the right, you see our dinner. As you can see, we like it very much. We followed the French custom of gnawing the bones until there was no more organic material left on bones. I forget what my dish was, but it was obviously very good. This is the Cathedral of St. Peter in Rennes, and you can see some of what I talk about in the ornamentation in these basilicas. This I felt was much more muted by comparison to other churches we saw. Certainly gilded, but it also had a very interesting, it looked more modern to me, the art, the altar and the pulpit that you can see in this photo. So from Rennes was a stopover again to our next destination, which was Lyon. Lyon is in the south, east of France, not all the way to the south, but by high-speed train, maybe 2 hours south of Paris. By car, I guess 4 hours, 5 hours. And we went to Lyon primarily because we wanted to go to Taizé. I'll tell you a lot about Taizé. But Lyon also, we spent a little bit of time in Lyon and we saw, again, some beautiful churches and went to their kind of restaurant as well. Their Gothic cathedral there is the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, and I felt it was beautiful. Part of it is my own bias toward Gothic style, but you see this rose, it's just stunning. The way the curve, the place in the window, just thought it was fantastic. This sense of curving, I'm not sure you can tell from the photograph, but this staircase up to the pulpit in the middle of the nave also kind of swoops up as it comes. It's an amazing thing made out of stone. This is, I believe, the apse of that cathedral. So, you know, it's style far more about simplicity and shape and kind of being drawn upward. In my sense, a greater sense of silence and mystery and awe. So very different from the basilicas in other places. This is a church that is literally up the hill from that cathedral, like looking down over that cathedral. This is Notre Dame de Lyon. It is a 19th century basilica built up on a bluff way above the river, whereas the cathedral is down closer to the river, and it is gleaming white, very much like Sabbaticals in Paris. And so you see the exterior and interior very ornamented. The pillars are much more Greek in style, and the capitals are very ornamented, very gilded. Beautiful building, but in a very different sort of style. Lyon is also a very old capital of the Roman province of Gaul. And so it has a very long history in the Roman Empire. So this is one of two amphitheaters. They're right next to each other, perhaps for different purposes. And then up toward the top of the picture, you can see this concrete building. That is the Gallo-Roman Museum that has tremendous exhibits of Roman history, Lyon. So you might remember a great father of the church, Irenaeus of Lyon, who was the bishop of Lyon. As a Roman city. There really, I couldn't find any kind of artifacts to do with Irenaeus. I mean, the cathedral came centuries way after Irenaeus. Certainly they cite his influence in his history, but they didn't have much in terms of artifacts. Lyon is also known as the gastronomic capital of France. So we had some great food there. So this was, so in England it's a pub, in Paris it's a cafe, it's a creperie in Brittany, and in Lyon it's a bouchon. So you want to go to a bouchon, and if you go to a bouchon, you're going to get the quenelle, which is like a big giant dumpling made with pureed fish. So I had the quenelle, and it's nice to have had the quenelle. I mean, it's, you know, it's delicate, I guess, and it's, you know, special. But, I mean, it's like having a hot dog in the United States. You go to a ball game, you can have a hot dog. I mean, is it a special hot dog? I mean, you know. But the rest of the meal was just stunning. So this is a dish that's it had. I didn't see many green beans, and maybe it wasn't the right time of year for green beans. But it's green beans, crayfish, tomato, I forget what, dill. I had it written down somewhere, but I was in the South. It was just incredible. All these Americans are all about volume. You know, we get the Olive Garden salad bowl comes in a 2-foot wide vat, and you get big spoons to serve it. Here not so much volume, although we can starve by any stretch of the imagination, but delicate. American food is about powerful flavors. French is about delicate, with a whole bunch of different flavors in it. One of the best meals that I had was in a museum cafe. I had this basket chicken with rice that had crushed almonds in it. You couldn't even see the almonds, but you could taste them if you took a minute for each bite, which I did. It was glorious. And on the right, this was like on some sort of almond paste cookie with orange and candied ginger and shrimp and avocado and prosciutto, jambon, it was just amazing. Soka's dish on the left was a ground lamb, cannelloni. Each of those little colors is a different kind of sauce. So you can have the dish with this sauce, and you can have the dish with that sauce, and then this other sauce. I had some tuna dish. The food was great. Now, food is a very spiritual thing. At Cesare, we had potatoes and beans for lunch. But it was also delicious. Cesare is a religious community north of Lyon. We stayed just for a day. We wanted to sort of check it out and see what it was all about. The way to really visit Cesare is to spend at least 5 days, if not a whole week. And Cesare is a religious community that was founded after World War II with a focus on reconciliation and Christian unity. So the man who founded it, Brother Roger, had been in France in World War II, had tried to help Jews in France during the occupation, but also, knew the Germans there as well, and saw the devastation in his country. And he got together with some other men who wanted to dedicate themselves, devote themselves to our Lord, and did so. Formed this community in this very small village of Cesare in the French countryside. And somewhere in the 1960s, I would say, they started to find a lot of young adults coming to visit them, to inquire about God, who were seeking meaning in their life. And so they oriented themselves to receive them, to extend this kind of Christian hospitality that Mother Elisa talked about to these young adults. And they kept coming, and they kept coming, and they kept coming. By the thousands, they kept coming. The worship that they have, morning prayer, noonday prayer, evening prayer, is very simple and contemplative. And it offers this ecumenical opportunity for young people to be connected to God, to offer prayers. I found it very rooted in the Christian faith. This isn't some sort of fuzzy, vague spirituality that sometimes you run into with this is very much rooted in the Christian faith. So there were readings from Scripture in different languages. There was the Taizé chant that we've used here at St. Peter and St. Paul, and perhaps you've heard or sung in other places, that draws you into this meditative state. There are Bible studies in the morning that bring all the visitors to the Taizé together in small groups to study the Bible. So you have people from around the world studying the Bible together, engaging with one another as you engage with the stranger, as Lisa talked about herself. And with Christ at the center. In the afternoon, there's some workshops. There's also a lot of time for prayer, for silence. And if you are a guest, you're also invited to take part in the work of the community, preparing meals and taking care of the properties. This picture is from the website that shows the worship. You see the brothers dressed in their white hat that they wear at worship. They wear on regular, shorts and a polo shirt. Otherwise, at least that's my account. The chapel that they built, it was in the 1960s, but they had so many guests that they needed to build an extension. And then they kept getting more guests, so they built an extension to the extension, which sort of expanded out. They have bunkhouses to house these people. They have huge expanses of fields to be able to allow people to pitch tents. There weren't necessarily thousands there when I was there, but there were people from all around the world. There was a big contingent from Germany, which I think was a section of Germany that had vacation at that time, because the Europeans sort of do it in blocks, different countries in blocks. So Silke and I got a chance to learn to know a German couple who had been there before, and she, I think, was a religious educator for her Catholic church in Germany. I forget what he did, but they'd come to Taizé. So that was fantastic. And we had a chance to walk around the grounds. There were some amazing places to pray there, which is very helpful for me. I spoke with one of the brothers who linked my ministry on spiritual life. The village is itself lovely. You can see kind of a glimpse of the French countryside in which Taizé is planted. Taizé, as I mentioned, is ecumenical, so they have Roman Catholic brothers, they have Protestant brothers. On Sunday mornings, they have the Eucharist, the Catholic Mass. And the Protestant brothers do not receive Holy Communion because it's Catholic Mass. But part of their aim is this ecumenical movement to draw us toward Christian unity. And it's something that popes, especially Pope John Paul II, who was in many ways a contemporary of Brother Roger, and who did similar things with young adults in Poland, really lifted up and praised Brother Roger for what he's done. He's one of the few Protestants in the world, perhaps the only Protestant in the world, that the Pope has given dispensation to receive communion in the Catholic Church. He died, unfortunately, he was killed by someone several years ago, but the community continues on its mission. There are beautiful icons that they use in their prayers. This is this wonderful icon of the Virgin Mary and Jesus. And on the right, it's not a very good picture, kind of grainy at this level, but it was an icon that I'd never seen before. They didn't have prints of it for sale in their shop. In their shop, they sell things that basically are made by the brothers themselves. This must have been given to the community. This is an icon of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. I'd never seen it before. I was really fascinated by it. And struck by the simplicity of the place. And as I say, one of the people who greeted us was a young man from the Netherlands who was spending a year there trying to search for God's call in his life and listening. So I'm excited to go back, and Silke said she'd love to go back too, and we found that our son Alex, has this, as he says on his bucket list, we're like, we'll take it. So I think it would be a wonderful place for us to go on pilgrimage. If you're interested, we can think about a way to go there and live that simple life of prayer and engagement with others. Something that I hope we can do here, our small groups and our foyers, and with the stranger that comes among us. So one of the benefits of this trip was to worship in French at the Abbey, worship in French and with other languages, with pilgrims from around the world at Taizé, and to get a sense of what it's like to have brothers and sisters in Christ all around the world who are also seeking a closer walk with God. And one of the ways that this was also driven home was someplace closer to home, and that is at St. Jude's. I think you've heard me mention in my sermon back on the 7th of August, But St. Jude's is a community that has an English-speaking service in the morning and a Spanish-speaking service in the afternoon. And Father Ramon Betances has been there, well, he's been the vicar of that Spanish-speaking community since 2004. The community was at St. Jude's at the time and was there for a while Father Frank Baltz, who's been a guest preacher and celebrant here, was the rector. After Frank retired, the new rector wasn't as friendly and inviting, and some others perhaps weren't as friendly as inviting to the community, and so the Hispanic community moved to St. Benedict's for a while. Then that rector ended up leaving the Episcopal Church and taking some members of the community with him. So Father Ramon and the Hispanic community came back to St. Jude's. Father Ramon became the vicar of the whole congregation, as I say, English speakers and Spanish speakers, and he's working to support both of those communities in his ministry. It is a very international community. By that I don't mean English and Spanish. By that I mean Mexican, Guatemalan, Nicaraguan, Colombian, Haitian, Dominican, Puerto Rican, Venezuelan. Very international. All these cultures are different from each other. And so they have this international festival where they can learn from each other, maybe share different foods from these other countries, speaking Spanish and English to each other, but they have that heritage. Well, the English speakers are very international. So there are people from Ghana and Liberia and from the Virgin Islands and from the Dominican Republic, of course, and Nigeria, I believe, as well as African Americans, as well as people from St. Jude's who've been there for generations. George Bennett, who've been a part of St. Jude's for a long time. And they, of course, have experienced a lot of change at St. Jude's and in the community around them as well. So it was interesting to spend time at St. Jude's, to spend time with Father Ramon, to learn to know his community a little bit better. He had been preaching Pentecost. What a perfect time to preach in a place like St. Jude's. A chance to learn to know some of the members of both congregations, to make some pastoral calls and see something about the lives of the community that he serves. They have a food pantry there. Father Ramon was talking with me about some of the food that is helpful to have in their food pantry. We're used to canned things, canned vegetables, canned beans. Especially in the Hispanic community, they like dried beans, so they can cook them themselves according to the recipe that they have. So packages of dried beans, things like that. But Father Ramon is also a gardener. So, rows of okra and squash. That's his thing. So he likes to bring those into the food bank as well. They have an after-school program called Path to Shine that helps kids after-school program. That's an opportunity. One of you might want to volunteer. I think they're asking for kind of a regular commitment to be there every Tuesday, to bring some continuity to the kids who are there. So it was fantastic to spend some time with Father Ramon and to see what God is doing with our two churches. Father Ramon was here for about 5 months, brushing up his English, learning to know us better. And you can see some grassroots things that are starting. There's some men and brothers at St. Andrew that have connected with Father Ramon and are working to support him. Mother Lisa and I and others with the closed closet ministry and others have gotten more and more connected with Father Ramon and St. Jude's. So I'm looking forward to see ways in which we might partner together. Not so much as patron client, right? That we have resources to offer them. Well, we do, and I think we should engage in it. But I think there's also an opportunity for us to see each other as brothers and sisters in Christ, and to help the congregations and themselves see each other as brothers and sisters in Christ as well. So maybe there's some things that we can do together in the ministry. So another part of my sabbatical had to do with places of prayer, and on many of these I already described these, but also connection to my roots. I used, not every day, but more regularly, the full service of morning prayer. My own habit of prayer has not really used the full service as much, but it's been a little bit more simplified, so I spent some time with that this summer. I did get a chance to go to St. Louis, where I lived in the late 1990s. I'll tell you a little bit about that. I did do some kayaking, not as much as I anticipated. I had a chance to see family in Michigan, and as I said, to rest. So let me take you through a few folks that fire about that. This is a grainy photo from the website. This is the Church of St. Michael and St. George in St. Louis, Missouri, where I was a layperson from 1990 to 1994. I was a member of the choir and did a number of other ministries. I was involved in a number of other ministries there. And it's a place that you know, helped form and shape me as a Christian, as a family, and did a lot, played a large role in my sense of calling to the priesthood. So I went back there for a funeral for a organist choir director that had served there, who died during COVID, and they were bringing back old choir members, former choir members, I should say. And so it was great to see everybody and to celebrate Ed Wallace, his life and his ministry at St. Michael and St. George's. This is actually an old photograph. I changed it. My heart breaks. You know, change. Gotta get used to change sometimes. But this is this wonderful. This is a little courtyard on the side of the church. And this little fountain, you see this this turtle squirting, kind of spitting at this little child who's kind of kicking his head back, just laughing. He's got his hands up, keep himself from getting splashed. I just think it's one of the most amazing little pieces of fountain architecture and art that I've ever seen. And it's just this place of just unabashed joy. You know, we need that in our spiritual life. We need that place where we're just laughing with God. And the place in which this is set faces a bench that is made out of brick, like this brickwork bench. And on that brickwork bench, on kind of the back of the brickwork bench, are bricks, solid red bricks with a kind of glossy face to it. They're about 6 inches square. And on some of those bricks are written the names of people whose ashes are interred behind them. It's a memorial garden. And this memorial garden is a sign of life, laughter, and vitality. It's just one of the, I don't know, it's a very special place for me and my heritage. It's great to be back there again, reflecting on all that, those roots. Plus, they have some of the best botanical gardens in the country. The Missouri Botanical Gardens are really fantastic. This is just a glimpse of 2 different places. They've got, well, it was wonderful to get back again. And I get a chance to do some kayaking. So this is a rapid called Flight Simulator. And Flight Simulator is about 25 feet tall. It drops in 3 drops. The first drop is about 8 feet. The second drop is 6 feet. The last drop is 12. I don't know if that is at 25. But something like that. And so it's in 3 stages, and it's kind of hard to get out of your boat and look at it. You kind of have to know where it is, what to do, and then just go over the edge and go for it. So, that's me. And I ran into a little bit of trouble at the bottom. So that gives you a sense of what I enjoy doing on the weekends. So that's the West Fork of the Tuckasegee River, and that's Flight Simulator. Not my best sense of Flight Simulator, unfortunately, but you know, at least I. You want to do it again?
Oh my goodness.
I got a little sideways. I'll show it to you one more time. Maybe I'm trying to think if I can.
That's supposed to be upside down.
No, I'm not. But there's some rocks at the bottom of that thing, and if you hit it in the wrong place, you do go upside down. That's why we wear helmets, elbow pads. Yeah, it was all right. Great, enormous fun. Show you the next. No, that's not it. There we go. This is me surfing in a rapid on the Ocoee River in the middle of Ocoee called Hellhole. So the river kind of converges in one spot, and this is the downstream flow. It's kind of coming in like this, and then it curls around and rolls up, and there's an upstream flow. It goes up like this. So with the upstream flow and the downstream flow converge, you can get on that and surf in that spot. And it's a little violent if you don't do it right. And here it catches a moment where I'm doing it right. You know, it looks like I'm doing a great job of surfing, but it's not a video, it's a still photo. So it's caught me at a really good spot. So that was good place to be. This is actually not from the summer, this is in February, but I love showing it off. This is so one of the money shots. This is on the Tellico River outside of Tellico Plains, Tennessee. And this is a waterfall called Baby Falls. This is on a section of the river called Tellico Ledges. Baby Falls is about 13 feet high. This is a really good level. There's a little knob on the edge of the waterfall. That's a great place what is a move? The move where you sort of throw yourself into that little knob as it launches yourself off. I didn't do it quite well, but it looks great. It looks like I'm doing it perfectly. It was a good landing all the same. Tellico is one of my favorite rivers. When you're kayaking, you especially if you can achieve a certain amount of skill at it, you can go to some places that are hard to see from any other form of transportation. There's some places that you can't really hike to very well, like Flight Simulator in Westport, Kentucky, a few other places on the river. Little River Canyon has got places that you really can only get there by kayak. Tellico you can see from roadside. You can watch kayakers go to the roadside. But it's a place of great beauty. It's a place of great peace. Natural beauty away from sort of the hectic craziness of the city. And in the middle of a Class 5 rapid, you can't really think about what's all the problems and so on the rest of your life. You're pretty focused and pretty joyful at the end of it. The other thing about kayaking is it's a place of friendship. So these are some good friends of mine. Tony Isle, just a tremendous godly man. Son Caleb, and this is Mike Wolford, a good friend of ours, who pray for me and I pray for them. And they encourage me in lots of wonderful ways and support me. This is a shot of the Grand Canyon. If you stick around late enough, you'll hear a little bit more about it. I went up to Michigan. My brother, who's in the foreground, my brother Bill, has a place on the shore of Lake Michigan up in the north, up on the pinky of the my dad is there in the background. Bill's wife had to go and tend to her mother, who has dementia, unfortunately. And my sister couldn't be there because she had another round of COVID, unfortunately. So this keeps going. But it was a good chance to get together and very much to rest. We went up on some hikes on Sleeping Bear Dunes National Park. If you've ever been there, when you think of dune as something that might be 10 feet high, but this thing is hundreds of feet high on the coast of Lake Michigan. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous place. And in July, in northern Michigan, it's astonishingly beautiful. We had a chance to spend several evenings out on what my brother calls diamond hour, an hour when the sun is shining on the water, and just sparkling. This is a little bit after diamond hour. This is the sunset. My wife and my dad. This is David William Pumphrey. And he was ordained to the priesthood in 1955, and he retired 37 years later, and now, I can't do the math, a whole lot of years as a priest in the church, and very much a hero of mine, and a great love of mine. Served almost all of that in the Diocese of Ohio. After my mom died in 2012, he went up to live in Ann Arbor with my brother. So he gets to wear blue now, but he's still, still rooting for Ohio State in one game. But it was great to see my dad. This is Henry, my brother's daughter. So it was really helpful for me to be able to reconnect with some of my roots, my family, and to rest. To rest. Some days just to sit and do nothing, which was extraordinarily helpful. And some of this, and I'll reflect some more on this, but some of that rest and the value of that rest became more apparent when I came back to St. Peter and St. Paul and got re-engaged and felt that same sort of energy doing ministry and felt a clearer sense of that absence of what it was like in the country. You had to be gone for a week or a week and a half or something like that, vacation, or even a few weeks when we went to the Grand Canyon. Is one thing, but to be gone for that stretch of time, to worship in another church, and yet to be disconnected from that church, as I reflected in one of my Thursday messages, just felt so strange and so different. And it felt so wonderful to come back and see people that I've been working with for coming up on 9 years now. Just felt so loved by you and felt such affection for you, and felt a sense of perhaps restful perspective on what ministry is all about. It's very easy, especially for me, to get tied up in the task of ministry. There's a lot of tasks of ministry to be done, and they're important tasks for sure. but to get the perspective of who I am as a child of God, of who I'm to be as a priest and a pastor to people, of how God moves primarily in our relationships one to another, is a very important reminder for me. And of course, I jump back into it, and there's all sorts of administrative duties to do. And those things are good pastoral care as well. But nonetheless, there is this invitation that God gives me to be mindful of those relationships and be mindful of, especially who I am as a child of God, and God's presence in me and through me as the primary vocation that I have, my brains and my vocation as a priest. Want the bonus round?
Yeah. Sure.
Ready for the bonus round? Not too hungry? Okay. Grand Canyon. So, many of you might know that my original plan, my sabbatical, was for 2020. And for the crown jewel of the sabbatical in 2020 would be a trip down the Grand Canyon with a bunch of my friends. I had won a lottery for a launch date for the Grand Canyon of August, was it 17th, I think? And, well, I didn't go on a sabbatical, but I took some vacation time and I went anyway, because it's hard to get lottery too. It's for a private trip. You can get all commercial trips, but to have a private motor trip that you put together with the gear and get your friends together and you go to it yourselves, that's hard to get into. It's a big lottery. So I went in 2020 and, praise the Lord, I had the good fortune to go again last year in 2021. So let me tell you a little bit about the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is a place of unparalleled beauty and scale. Vast in its proportions, its history, and its power. It is a place of beauty from the rim, and actually I didn't go to the rim, this is somebody else's picture that gave it to me. This is from the rim of the Grand Canyon. It's a place of beauty from the rim, and even more so from deep in its belly on the Colorado River at its core. The Grand Canyon formed over millions of years. It is 18 miles wide in places, and it is over a mile deep. 6,000 feet deep. So think about how tall those paintings in the Louvre were, 20 feet. And then think about what 100 feet might be like. And then what 1,000 feet might be like. This thing is 6,000 feet deep. And it exposes over 20 different layers of rock. There are 277 miles of river in the official stretch of Grand Canyon National Park. But to get to the end, you've got to go another 3 miles to get to take it. So 280 miles of river is what we paddled in both of these trips. It is a place of breathtaking scenery, where each section of the canyon exposes a different kind of rock, a different view, a different feel. From vertical sandstone cliffs, notice that's an enormous raft full of people and gear. That's the flip side. From vertical sandstone cliffs to sloping shale to giant hunks of lava frozen in time. Scale is kind of down at the bottom of what's called Vulcan's Anvil.
Where is
this is Vulcan's Anvil. This is just upstream of Lava Falls, which is probably mile 180. Mile 180 of the canyon. So it's a lower section of the canyon. There is, I'm not sure if you can see it in this picture, there's a fissure, there's a very narrow fissure. There's an old fissure there where the stone broke apart and lava came up from the surface of Vulcan's Anvil and a bunch of places further downstream. Giant hunks of lava frozen in time. There's side hikes of magical beauty and slot canyons that feed down into the Colorado River. So you imagine this vast plateau sort of uplifted over geological time. And this canyon that gets carved through the middle of it. And then occasionally there's a bunch of rain and it falls over the lip of the canyon. And in places it's a little lower, and so it all collects in that spot. And then it carves a slot canyon down to the main Colorado River. So you're going on the Grand Canyon, and then there's the side canyon that goes off perpendicularly. And big rainfalls make big rock falls. Those big rocks can tumble down into the canyon, into the river, block up the river, form a pool, forms a rapid. That's the geology of the river, the whitewater of the river. But you can go up those side canyons and hope that flash flood's not going to appear while you're doing that. And there are these amazing hikes. This is Mount Canyon Canyon. And this is one of the, you can keep going on this thing, but this is one of the sections. A little bit further below is this, but it's just this magical spaces. This is one of these places where you like put your back against one wall, your feet up against the middle, kind of scoot yourself up until you can get a more of a foothold. The first trip, a lot of these sites are tremendous. These side canyons carve stunning spaces and verdant oases out of the barren desert. This is called Elm's Chasm. And so, I mean, it is desert, it is dry, there's not a whole lot of vegetation. Every now and again, especially in the side canyons, you find these little sort of Shangri-La places. There's a place on the river called Deer Creek Falls. And as you come by, you can see this waterfall, big powerful waterfall, maybe 150, 200 feet in the air. And it comes down into this pool. You can swim around in that pool. And you can take a hike up the rock and go around, and you kind of turn around this cliff wall. And then there's a little bit more of an narrow canyon, at the bottom of which is the top of Deer Creek Falls. You walk up a little bit further, and this is what you find. You find cottonwood trees and grasses and this, calm, cool water. Because let me tell you, it was like 112 degrees in the shade at Benton Ranch. It was seriously hot and bone dry in the desert. So to find a place like this, it was pretty hot and exhausting going up, but then for lunch you could just like hang out and sit in the pool. Cool off. This is the patio above Deer Creek Falls. This, I think, might be another shot of Elm's Chasm. Yours truly, relaxing in some cool water. Actually, the Colorado River is very cold water because it comes off the bottom of the dam at Glen Canyon Dam. So the water is usually like 45 degrees. It's bone chilling cold, so that's why I'm wearing a dry top and some thin base layer insulation on my legs, even though it's 100 degrees inside, because on the river it's pretty cold. The second trip in 2021, the lake level on Lake Powell above Glen Canyon Dam had dropped so far, and the heat was so high that the water was much warmer. So by the last few days of the 2021 trip, we weren't wearing dry tops. We were just wearing rash tops. Even though the water's usually cold, but it's a lot warmer then. We set out on a wilderness adventure where the only way out is downstream or by emergency helicopter. This was an unusual, in particular was an unusual moment of rain and otherwise very dry set of trips. Drought was true on both 2020 and 2021. Rarely ever rained at all, even in monsoons. Notice in this case also these lava-based rocks where we were. This was the 2021 trip, I think, because you see all these kayakers. I'll explain what I mean by that. In 2020, I organized a raft-supported kayak trip. Many of my friends ended up backing out of the trip. We were going to take 17 days to do it. A lot of people didn't have a lot of vacation time. COVID interfered, so I was hoping to get a team of people at the last minute. So I recruited a lot of people that I didn't really know, and it turned out pretty well. So there were folks from California, Colorado, and a guy from Norwood who had done the trip several times, some of the friends that I knew. Plus, there were some kayakers that I knew from the Southeast, a few that I didn't know but were known to others. This is in Silver Grove. This is our crew. We were a team of 3 rafts and with 7 rafters and then 5 kayaks. This is, I think, our first camp on the river. We camped at the Hood, and then this is, I forget the name of this camp. So you find a little place, you have maps that tell you, oh yeah, this is a place where you can camp. A little spit of sand that you can pull over on and then set up camp. And so we had our 3 rafts. Our kitchen is getting set up here, so we have some tables that we unloaded and a tarp. And this is all our gear that we pull off the rafts. I set up my cot here on the beach, along with some others, slept under the stars every night. Just amazing. Now, it was hot, because at night, wind starts blowing up the canyon. And those 6,000 feet of wall that have been baking in the summer sun, 112-degree heat, make that air really hot. And somebody said, so this is in August, right? Somebody said it's like sleeping with a hairdryer on your face. I thought they were exaggerating, but they weren't. And so I'm sleeping like this, and the wind is coming like this, and And it's just like going up my nostrils and desiccating my brain. I had to turn myself around so that it would glow like this, so that I wouldn't completely shrivel up clean-wise by the end of the night. But it was a pretty amazing place to be. Here are the 5 kayakers, myself over on the right, and some friends of mine, some people that I didn't know, but we all had a great time, very able boaters and very supportive. This is, the water level changes, the dam changes the water level, so this is us sliding the boat back into the water because it receded and so it was all on the sand a little bit. But you can see lots of gear that we were put on there. So we have all our gear, all our food in ammo cans and in huge coolers that have block ice at the bottom of them. And I gotta tell you, we ate like kings. We ate extraordinarily well on this trip, although it was a lot of effort to set up the kitchen, to do the cooking, and to do the cleaning. We still ate pretty well for 17 days in the wilderness. And of course, we had this filtration equipment to filter the water from the river. Pack everything in, you pack everything out, like everything. Like pack your poop out, ammo. So you want to keep the wilderness pristine. This is another example of a campsite. Here, one of the rafters is writing a journal. Some people are relaxing on the beach. So you find a spot, a sandy spot, you lay your tarp out, set up the cot, and bring the gear over, and that's where you stay. And this amazing view is one of 17 amazing views from camps that we had, 16 or 50. We stayed one day in one camp. So we, on the first trip, we camped 16 nights on the river, floored the last 36 miles of hot water on rafts overnight. We just tied the rafts together, tied the kayaks to the rafts, and just slept on the boat. It got kind of cold because we're in the middle of the river. It was cold, it's in the desert. And at the end of the river, it opens up wide, so it didn't hold heat the same way. This is our kitchen. You see this ammo can here. That's got a day's worth of food, dinner and lunch and breakfast in one ammo can. And that's Josh on kitchen duty. Some people wondered what on earth I was doing in the Grand Canyon, and one of our parishioners drew her impression of probably what I was doing in the Grand Canyon. This is Sophia Vancelo's idea, and I thought this was really well done. You got the river, you've got water going on here, you've got the canyon walls, got the rock walls there, nice vertical cliff there, probably Marble Canyon, I'd say. You've got the wind blowing, sunshine for sure. Here I am sitting in my kayak. Now, it's a blue kayak, not a red one. I do have a red one, so maybe she had confusion. I'm sitting, my feet are all splayed out in front. This is me being enthusiastic about, I have 2 paddles. That's not typical. Usually just one paddle works for me. This is me going through Upset Rapid, which was loads of fun. Didn't get a lot of shots of me through there. You see I have a little camera on the top of my head. That was fun. I took some video. This is a closer shot of me. And so this is a boat that I use here on a lot of big water rivers like the 2 that I showed you in the earlier shots. It's about 9 feet long. It's large volume. Stern power and stern, so it's good for big water. Good for keeping yourself up and off the rocks. There are other types of kayaks for other things. This is, there are over 100 named rapids on the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. They are huge, but by the standards of the southeast water, they're not particularly dangerous. Rocks are seldom in play. The thing is really, really wide. Okay, so this is one of the rapids where rocks are in play. You see how far away that is from the center line of the river. But yeah, this is one of the maybe 3 rapids where you've got rocks in play and you have to make sure you get around. The line, so to speak, the safe route through the rapid is usually maybe 30 feet wide. So if you have any amount of skill, you can probably go by line. Now, the rapid's powerful, for sure. The waves are pretty powerful. This is a particular lava falls. The anatomy of almost all of the rapids on the Colorado River is pretty much the same. It starts with this big glassy wave. You go down this big glassy wave, you come up, down, and you come up, and then what's happening is the rocks that form that obstruction that pull the water up and send it down those waves form an eddy line that V's into the middle. And so when you come to that middle, you've got this big, big wave train that gets you up, maybe 15 feet high in the air. And then the waves all crash into each other. And, it's doing a bunch of this, and the water's swirling around. And then these huge eddies of whirlpools and so on. So it's enormous fun. And I'm going to show you a video. Yes, yeah, they're in the center of the rapid. Now, interestingly enough, it's not getting out of the slideshow.
Yeah.
There we go. Get here. So this is the only video I took where I put the camera on the boat. But it was so much fun. This is a rapid permit. So this is the pool above the rapid, and pretty soon you're going to get a sense. It's hard to tell the way these cameras work, but if you see the land go like this, then you have an idea about what's going on. So this is where the wave starts. First glassy wave right about here, up and down the next glassy wave. Then it starts to get fun. Now it gets into the big crashy water, but it's still wave after wave after. These things were like 15 feet tall. They were absolutely enormous. You see some of those waves behind you. You see the way the whole, earth keeps moving like that. That's me kind of going up and going down these waves. And there's some holes, some spots where you can get pretty well trashed by the river, but usually they're just these big wave trains. It's an enormous amount of fun.
Are you doing any control here in your town, or are you just moving? Letting it take you where?
I'm for sure controlling. Yeah, I'm definitely trying to stay upright. And a forward stroke is your best brace. Kind of bracing if I'm getting out to one side, but a forward stroke is your best brace. You want to keep straight. If you get sideways, you're more likely going to flip it sideways. If you're going pedal on into it, that shows you a little trick. So if you fall over, you can always get back up again. Did anybody miss that?
You have your nose clipped together to keep.
I did, yeah, I'm a wimp. So, a lot of kayakers don't do that, but I do use nose clips. How shall I put this? It gives me a few more seconds of saying it. If I'm getting water in my nose, then I don't have a lot of patience. I'm trying to get up, and if it doesn't work, then I'm out of the boat. It's a bad thing. So, that, if I miss it, I'm like, okay, sit up again. Okay, sit up again. All right, try again. Do it well this time now. So that's,
You're going to continue to do it, because we may need to take out a big injury.
well, I make some wise choices about it. That's for sure. This is Lava Falls. This is the hardest one in the river. And as you come up, you'll see Leslie is upstream or downstream of me. Leslie's going to go up and over and disappear. She's in the rapid now. There's a big Mungo hole on the left that you want to avoid. So this is, you want to stay right in these holes, and there's another hole on the right you want to avoid too. You're going to come over this crest. You don't see it until you're on top of it. You want to be in the right place. Now go left, go left, go left. Well, it didn't go left. So it threw me over into the big V hole, which is this mess, and over. So, first try, well, that didn't work so well. Second try, I come up now, I'm backwards in the rapid, going back to that wave train I showed you a picture of earlier. It's enormous fun. You can see how big these waves are.
Did Silka do this with you?
What's that?
Did Silka do this with you? Silka kayak with you?
No. No. Long time ago when we were dating, she went to like an introduction to kayaking. Of course, they showed her movies on hypothermia and put her upside down underwater. She said, that's enough. She's come kayaking with me, or rafting. But that's not really well. Let me go back here. Almost done. And so this is the team that I went with in 2021. There were 10 of us. This was a self-support kayak trip. And a number of these are friends who did not go with me in 2020. One of the trip leader was a guy that I invited to go, and he invited me to this trip. A self-support kayak trip. So this is where, you know, all that stuff that's in those boats, the rafts, we had to pack it in the kayaks. So these are longer kayaks. These are about 12 feet long. They have hatches in the back, and you can put a bunch of gear in the back of it. And you got to pack everything in, pack everything out. So you get water filtration equipment that you bring with you, cot to fold down. Now, 280 miles, we did it in 16 days, the first trip. We did it in 9 days, this trip. It was about 30 miles a day, and it was beyond my fitness level. It was a bit hard. So at the end, I was pretty exhausted. I took Facebook with some kayaking friends, not really anyone kayaking friends, mostly. So I posted these pictures and I said, Canadian Tom to Peloton in 2 showers. And someone said only 2, and I said they were 2 long showers. So, but you know, what a beautiful, beautiful place in which to be exhausted. This is another unusual moment of rainfall in the Grand Gorge. This is a campsite. It was a large campsite, and there was another group of rafters. They had motorboats. They invited us to share the campsite with them. So, you know, we sat together. They made us food. They had all kinds of extra food. They brought us this amazing chili colorado or something like that. We sat around a imaginary campfire, and somebody brought out a guitar and started playing and singing. Gosh, what an amazing, incredible trip. Fantastic place. This is my cot. On the last night, we were actually working, it wasn't in the campsite, we were supposed to camp there. But this one got a little cold, so I brought my tent fly and put it on top of me, just trying to keep it airy. But I just had some sheets and cot, and I floated under the stars. Just an amazing place. Beautiful, beautiful place. On my first trip in 2020, I celebrated communion in one of our camps, and I read a portion of Psalm 104. In the King James Version, this portion reads, it remarks about the wonders of God's creation, including that great Leviathan. Leviathan is like a sea monster. Including that great Leviathan which you have made for the sportive in true King James style. And I preached about that, about how this Grand Canyon, this incredibly huge place, this place of amazing beauty, this place of just cataclysmic formation. Maybe God made it just for sport. You know, how much utility does the Grand Canyon have? You know, just for the sport. And to think and imagine that the God of the universe, so great, whose little finger could form the Grand Canyon, this tiny little scratch in Earth's surface over this great planet, who made this planet among many in the solar system and on the whole galaxy, this amazing God of the universe, knows you, loves you personally. Just astonishing.
There's no other ontology but this.
Yeah.
And that.
Yeah. So I thank you for, living into that love is what a sabbatical is about. Learning to live into that love when we return from our sabbaticals. It's what the Christian life is about. So I thank you for the privilege of this journey that I was on. And I say to you, God bless you, as you seek the one who loves you so dearly.